What you doing, podcast? I'm the AC, and I'm very happy to have my guest for this podcast be.
So, according to my book, I am CL Sidell, but you can call me Crystal. I am a librarian. I've been a librarian for several years. That comes up in my book. I'm also a big time animal lover, and I share my house with a lot of pets. So, you may hear some birds chirping and some cats mewing. They may even come across the screen because they kind of do that sometimes. So, I apologize in advance.
And I love having animals in the podcast, so I'm fine with that. Yeah, let me introduce myself in the podcast real quick before we start. Like I said, I'm the AC. I'm currently a master's student here in Hawaii, studying ethnomusicology. But when I want to take a break from all the academic stuff, I like to make YouTube videos where I talk about books, movies, show, anime, manga, anything nerdy, anything I find interesting, really. And then, of course, I started this podcast for mainly just to talk to people I find interesting too. And lately that's been authors. And that's why I've had Crystal on here because I really like her book, Repetition. And we're going to talk about that and a bunch of cool stuff that went into it. So before we get into the book itself, I just mainly want to talk about your inspirations for getting into writing in general.
For getting into writing? Well, I am one of those people that I feel like was born to write. So
Hmm.
I've always considered myself a writer, even if I wasn't writing. Um, there, when I said I'm going to try to cut down on those today. I remember writing my first book in the first grade. There may or may not have been words, but I recall that it was about bears and ice cream.
Oh,
And yeah, so there were drawings, which I'm not an artist, so I don't know where that came from. But my teacher did laminate it and make it spiral bound to give it to my mom, and I'm sure she still has it somewhere. So I wouldn't say I've like anything in particular inspired me to write per se. It's just something that's been in me from the get go. In fact, it's actually something I think I inherit from my mom. Interestingly enough, she does not write. She's told me in the past that she used to have ideas for stories and she made a conscious effort to suppress them because she didn't want to be a writer.
oh.
So, yeah, I find that hard to empathize with because I can imagine not writing. But so it's just something that's always been
Oh. Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Um, like I don't know if I've always considered myself a writer, but like you, remember writing my first story right when I was itty bitty, sometime in elementary school. I don't remember the grade exactly, but it was about a dog looking for a pet for himself, and then finding another dog to be his friend.
there.
Uh, it was. I also illustrated it, even though I don't think I'm a artist either, and I don't know what happened to it. It just got lost in time and it destroyed like it probably should have been. But yeah, no, that's the first time I'm writing. And then going was like, yeah, anybody if you write or if you want to be a writer, you can just be a writer. You don't there's this I don't know if it's a real debate, but you see people it's like you have to be published to be a writer. And it's like, no, you just
Oh, yeah.
literally have to write. And it's like if you want to be a
Hmm.
writer, it's easy. You just write. Published or
Yeah.
not, it's just something you enjoy.
Hmm.
So yeah, no. Ah. Um it's cool that that's where your writing comes from. It's a interesting thing that your mother would have ideas and then not want to be a writer, but and then it passed on you that you still did want to be one.
Hmm.
So where did how so where did your inspiration for repetition come from? I know you talked about uh, it comes from a story your mom told you, but yeah, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I don't really know how much there is to say, to be honest. I mean, what happened was she told me this incident where she was in her bed in this creepy old house. I think she said that somebody had actually committed suicide in that house.
Mm,
Um, but she told me this story many, many years ago, and I really need to ask her to tell it to me again. So I don't remember the finer details, but she was about Stella's age, so she was about 5, I think, and she was in her bed at night, and this flame just sprung up out of nowhere on the mattress. And she was all by herself and she was scared. And the only thing she could think to do was to pat it out with her hands, which worked. But when she woke up in the morning, there was no evidence of charring or anything on the sheet, but her hands were blistered. And my grandparents apparently, um, ignored it or just didn't acknowledge it. So I just thought that that was a very compelling idea. And I think she told me this. Yeah, she told me this story right around the time I had really taken up writing in earnest, like short stories.
Yeah.
And so the horror writer in me, because I've always been drawn to horror, thought it would make a really cool short story. So Repetition was not actually supposed to be a novel. It was intended to be a short story. But what had happened was I, grabbed the pen and the paper and I started writing. And March was the first person that came out. And then I started thinking, well, why is March not coming to Stella's rescue in this very, traumatic moment? And so then I started building up March's character, figuring out who she was. And then the buildup just got longer and longer and longer. And suddenly I realized I was writing a novel. That's kind of how that happened.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Uh, and I'll write a lot of short stories, so it's cool that.
Sorry, kitten's biting me. The kitten is biting me.
But yeah, it's cool to think that this was starting out as a short story and then it built on to a whole novel.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, I always try to write short stories, and they always turn out longer. But I haven't had that's a lot. I haven't had a short story turn into a whole novel yet, but I have taken short story ideas and then decided to turn them into a novel later, or just a simple idea. So no, it's cool that you did that. How long were you writing Repetition? When did you start?
So, sorry, the kitten is attacking me. I anticipate this happening. So I actually wrote Repetition in I think it was 3 months, the first draft. This is my second attempt at writing a novel. My first attempt was when I was 18, and I started writing this story. This was after I graduated high school, and I got to like 300 pages and realized I had no idea how much longer it was going to be, and I got frustrated and gave up. So Repetition was kind of my second attempt, and it was the summer. I was on break from school and I wasn't working, so I said I'm just going to spend at least 3 hours every day writing this book, and I did. It was a terrible first draft, though. So that's one of the reasons it took a very long time to get it published. So that was my first. Sorry, this kitten is a monster. Experience with the manuscript, and then I picked it up again in 2010 after I'd finished college, and I was still working part-time, so I had the time. And that's when I did a lot of the rewrite and wrote all of the library scenes, because this is actually reminding me just now that she had originally worked in a photo department.
Oh.
So by the time I picked up Repetition again, photo departments weren't really a thing. We're kind of gone. I'm dating myself here. So yeah, I would say I probably spent I don't know, maybe 4 months on it at that point. And then when I picked it up for the third time, I'd say maybe 5 or 6 months. So even though the book is like really old, I didn't necessarily work on it for 16 years. It feels like I have.
It's cool. Uh, were there other inspirations that went into repetition besides the initial story with your mom?
Well, like a lot of the library stuff, because when I started working on it the second time around, I thought, what do people say? They always say you should write about what you know. And I had already been working in a library for 5 years, and I had been doing March's job essentially. So I thought, I'm just going to use this stuff I know really well because I hate to say it being a librarian, but I don't always like to do research. So it was easier just to write about something I already know. So a lot of the stuff that happens in her day to day work life it's grounded in reality. It might not have actually happened, but it's realistic expectations of what may happen in a public library, which hopefully some people will find entertaining because I think there's this misconception that libraries are quiet, peaceful environments, and that's not necessarily true. And then so there's this like I hate to give stuff away with the book for
Okay.
people who haven't read it. Um,
This
but
can
there's
be a lot of spoilers if you want it to be. Uh,
uh, but the scene with Stella in the bathtub, like that's drawn from personal experience. Except with me, it was a pool, and I was like 4. So I like to think that scene is very realistic in the sense that I experienced it firsthand, except I was telling it from March's perspective in front instead of the child. So, but yeah, I mean, then a lot of it is just stuff I've experienced being a Floridian, so the natural environment and things like that. Sorry, my cockatoo is
no,
yeah, drama queen.
it's okay. Floridian. I'll assume that's different than the stereotypical like Florida man experience that everyone memes out. But no, I get it. Uh, yeah, I kind of do that too. Kind of a lot. Some of my stories either comes from my dreams, which I actually had a dream about a haunted house. That's why I love haunted houses. It was a reoccurring dream I had a lot. It was the same like haunted house I'll be in. But yeah, like haunted house stories, I love. Or just I'm writing a story about music because I'm a got a degree in music. So yeah, I'm definitely one of those people that writes what I know, mainly because I've spent a lot of time doing research, but that's for academic sake and not like my own fun. Um, so another thing I was wondering about is where the name for the book repetition comes from. I mean, the name of books is something I feel like may be one of the hardest parts of actually writing a book is trying to find the best name for it. From my theory is just because of the repetitions referring to all the women that kept dying in the house. Is that kind of the right track?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So when you asked that question, I thought, where did that title come from? I honestly don't remember when it came to me. All I can tell you is that it is the only title the book has ever had. It has
Oh,
always been repetition.
hmm,
It was just a word that came to me and it stuck.
yeah.
But yes, it definitely refers to the curse and the women dying untimely deaths throughout history. So yeah, you got it.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering. It's cool that you kept the same name the whole time. I change names and stuff over and over again, and I still feel like I'm never satisfied with naming stuff.
They're
But
hard. It's
it,
so hard.
um, so I know we've actually already talked a little bit about it, but I realized I never actually asked you what repetition is actually about. I mean, anybody who's already read it will know, and but just hearing from you, what is repetition?
Oh, I'm terrible at summarizing things. So repetition is about March. I do consider her the central, force of the novel. Um, she's come out of a traumatic experience where she's lost her spouse. She's also lost parents in the past, which have affected her relationship with her sister. And she decides that she's going to start over because the only family she really has is on the other coast. So she moves, but she and her sister are estranged, and there's tension there, and she just wants to get out of her sister's house as quickly as she can, which is how she ends up in this haunted house, which just seems like it's a good deal for what she's looking for, and she likes the neighborhood. So like that's pretty much the driving force to getting her into this house. And it is a bit of a slow burn, but when I was writing the novel, I thought, oh my God, how can I make this story so that this woman actually stays in this house? Because, in reality, I'd probably be moving. So, so, yeah, it's just about this woman. She's got psychological issues and trauma to work through. And some of the things that happen in the house kind of mirror or reflect maybe some of what she's experienced. So there's this possibility that it is all in her head and not something that's actually happening. So it's kind of her, working through her own issues too until stuff starts to really happen. Then it's a different story.
No, that was actually one the my favorite parts of the story is how March tries to rationalize everything through her experiences and just convinces herself it's in her. Because yeah, like you say, it's a slow burn. I guess I actually thought there was plenty of stuff always going on, and maybe that's just the pace I read it, so it doesn't seem slow to me. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no, the ha- you see a lot of these like paranormal haunted house kind of things. They are kind of slow. It takes a while for things to actually happen. You get these little creepy things, but the stuff you put in are like legitimately creepy. And the way she tries to rationalize them and be like, "No, it's all in my head." I'm like, "Ooh, that's a tough one to try to rationalize and try to convince yourself otherwise." Like, it's that would be something creepy. But then, I mean, we'll talk more about our own experiences, supernatural experiences in houses or whatever. But like, I've had experiences like that too, and I just convince I don't even try to convince myself of the fake. I just accept them because I think stuff like that's cool, and I kind of want to live in a haunted house. Um, so yeah, it's cool she does that kind of stuff, and to stay in the house. I mean, she had all these desperate situations in her life to make her want to find a house to stay in, and she really fights to stay in it, no matter all the stuff that's happening in the house.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right. It was a nice neighborhood. I like how it doesn't center only in the house. It goes out, like, of course, her work as a librarian, when she goes out and meet neighbors, even shopping or the park, everywhere she goes, somehow always connects, either because of the people that had other experiences with the house or the other neighbors or something. Everything relates back to this house and everything stays connected and it all fits nicely together. And I liked it. So I wouldn't consider it a slow read at all. That might just be my opinion. I think there's always something engaging and keeping the story going.
Oh, thank you. I do try to make everything count. I tried
Mhm.
really hard to make everything count. I don't know if I was 100% successful or not, but I did try.
Oh, I really think you did. Like I said before. But yeah, most of it is from Marsh's perspective. But then you have one chapter that's from Stella's, and it's the thing you were talking about with your mom. Um, why did you decide to have just that one chapter? Why wasn't there more, or why did you add it to begin with?
It just happened. It just happened that way. I don't even know if it was really a conscious choice on my part. I just knew when I started writing, because like I said, it was originally supposed to be a short story. I just knew from the beginning that I was leading up to that scene. And who's that famous author that said you have to kill your darlings? So was that Fitzgerald maybe or somebody?
Maybe I know the
Um,
saying. I
so
don't remember who said it.
I I was thinking about that yesterday. I'm like, was that a darling I should have killed? I'm not
Oh,
sure because you're right. It's a little jarring because it is the only section of the book that is not from March's perspective. And yeah, that's kind of weird. But I don't know how else I could have told that part of the story without showing it firsthand. And
mm,
I felt like it was, I mean, for me personally, it was the heart of the novel and it kind of gets things rolling really in the novel. Um, but the novel was never about Stella, so I think it wouldn't have felt right to me to have other chapters from Stella's perspective. And it wasn't an omniscient novel either. I think initially I tried to write it in omniscient, maybe in my very first draft, and then it turned into March's point of view. So I don't know. I just really wanted to tell that part of the story, and I didn't know how else to tell it except for Stella's eyes. But it is jarring, right? I mean, it kind of takes you out a little bit.
I wouldn't say jarring. I mean, besides the change in this perspective, I mean, it does make sense as a scene in the story. And like I said, it's pretty much the turning point in the book too, where stuff really starts to happen. Um, yeah, I wouldn't say it's jarring. It fits, and it is that important scene. But yeah, I mean, I'm not the one writing, so I couldn't. I would not find any way to do anything different with it. Yeah, I didn't ask this question out being like, oh, I didn't like that. I like the scene. It's probably one of the creepiest scenes. I think from that point it gets creepier and creepier, but it's definitely one of the creepiest scenes. And to see it from her perspective is as it adds this like another level of horror to it to see it from like this child's perspective. So yeah, no, I like what it is. I was just curious. That's
No,
it.
it's a good question. I wish I had a better answer as the writer of the story. Like there are some things that happen with Stella that I I left a lot unspoken in the book that I kind of hoped readers would pick up on, especially or particularly with Stella. Like the little bits with the doll, like there's something going on there. And then, of course, there's the bathtub scene, and there was something going on there as well, but we don't really see it because the story's not from Stella's
Mhm.
perspective. Um, and I don't know, like there's this part of me that just doesn't want to give too much away, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing in a book. Um,
I
I
think
just
in
I
a
just
horror
kind of
book
hold
like this,
back.
yeah, I
I'm
think in a
sorry.
horror book like this, you don't need to give a lot of stuff away because that
Mhm.
kind of ruins the suspense or like the
Mhm.
mystery, the creepiness of it. And you do you do a good job at, yeah, we can figure out as a reader, and I'll say we as an because I have, yeah, I didn't really have any lingering questions about what's happening with Stella. You did just remind me though about like that doll because there's a lot of uh, I don't know. Uh, for some reason, they have some kind of negative feelings towards the doll, March and her sister. If I, the way I interpret it, at least, but I don't remember if they actually say completely why, or maybe I forgot why they don't like this doll, but Stella loves it. Can you?
Oh, yeah, March had it was just a symbol of favoritism toward her sister.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because her sister had the doll, like a neighborhood cat lady. I wonder who she's based on. Maybe she was a bird lady. Now I don't remember. It's my own book. This is terrible. But she had given Bridget this doll as a birthday present, and I don't think she'd ever given March any birthday present. So
Oh,
it was just representative on that level. It was representative of March's issues with, her thinking Bridget got some better things in life than March did.
oh,
So
okay.
there was that on that one level, but on a supernatural level, there's something else going on too.
Yeah.
So
So with March not liking the doll or whatever, is that because, or seeing Stella with the doll, is that also kind of like Stella's kind of having some favoritism with Bridget?
yeah,
Okay.
oh yeah, definitely. March has issues.
uh, I mean, that's what makes the protagonist intriguing is having a backstory, which she does a lot of it, a lot of stuff going on. Um, so yeah, okay, yeah. Like I said, you didn't really leave anything unclear to me. If I pretty much, I wouldn't say I figured it out, but I knew what you were doing. And like I said, a horror shouldn't have like blatantly obvious things going on. That ruins the suspense of it. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about any of that stuff. There are plenty of things to theorize. I mean, whenever I made a video talking about this, and I talked about there's a phone ringing at the last third of the book or something like that that keeps interrupting March's sleep. And I made a theory. You kind of already told me my theory is wrong, but I want to just, I guess, express it again because it makes sense in my head, and I just want to be convinced otherwise. So throughout the book, what's her name? Agatha, the sister. Okay,
Hmm?
she is telling them like, if you hear a ringing, that's a good thing, um, and not to be afraid. She especially telling that to Stella because she heard that before. And then at the near whenever the phone ring starts happening, it keeps happening a lot again. And I realized, unless I'm just forgetting, March never heard any kind of bell ringing until the phone ringing. And then when that happened, I was like, is this supposed to be kind of the same thing? Like, I guess a adult would hear a phone ringing instead of a bell. A kid might hear a bell. And then I was like, well, nothing bad happens for most of the time that the phone is ringing. Whenever she answers it, there's nothing on the other line, and then she just starts unhooking it. And then I was like, maybe that's it, maybe. But then I read the ending, and it kind of pretty much proves it wrong. But yeah, until the end, March never hears that bell. I guess my question is, what are your thoughts about my theory?
Okay, yeah. So that's the thing. Like, as the writer, I do want you to have your own. Like, I hate to tell you the answer, um, but where I was going with the telephone ringing was I wanted the reader to be able to kind of create their own ending or interpret the
Oh,
ending on their own. So, as a reader, hopefully you'll see one of two endings, and one will be supernatural, one will be natural. So I was kind of building up to that. So I mean, the ringing of the phone ties into a potential villainous character. So at the end of the book, you're like, well, was this villainous character involved in what happened, or were supernatural forces in play with what happened? So
mm,
I kind of wanted to leave that up to you. Like, I kind of have my own ideas about what happened. Maybe they work together.
oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, actually, no, it actually does. It kind of blows my mind a little bit. One, I guess it also it makes the phone ringing. What do you a red herring? Is that when? What do you call it when you're trying to?
Yeah, no, you're right, I think.
Yeah. So, uh, yeah. But now what you just said about the end, it just occurred to me. Um, yeah, when she finally hears that bell, and it's supposed to mean she's safe, it could be saving her from the other like the unsupernatural or the just natural. Or the yeah, it could have two different endings. I didn't even think about that until you just said that. Now it just kind of blows my mind, and it makes me think about the ending even more. No, that's really cool. Even I already really like how it ended, which normally the endings are always kind of iffy for me, but I like this one because I thought it was a cool conclusion of the book without really outwardly stating this is how it ends. It does leave it up to interpretation. But man, now I just got to think about that because I didn't even think about that before. I didn't realize it. Okay, no, yeah, okay, that's cool.
You're
Cool.
welcome.
That's why I like having authors on and being able to talk about their own books because it makes me realize more stuff about the books, and this is a really cool thing for me to discover. Yeah, no, cool. But so there that there is plenty of supernatural stuff in it, and a lot of it is creepy. And seeing March fight through it in her own emotion, her own mind. Um, but about another thing, I'm just thinking about um, all her interactions, I guess, outside of that house, um, especially the library and with her neighbors. Um, I mean, you see a lot of or I see you. I see a lot of movies and other stuff when they do haunted uh, houses, stuff like that. It does focus mainly just in the house. What was your plan for, I guess, expanding beyond that? Uh, if you get what I'm saying.
I don't know if I had one, but something I forgot to mention in the beginning of our talk was that I actually did not plot this novel
Oh,
when
cool.
I started writing it, which I'm lucky. I think I'm lucky I finished because I am definitely somebody who needs to know what's going to happen.
Mm,
But yeah, no, I did not plot out what was going to happen in this novel. Maybe the second time around when I was doing rewrite, I might have worked on it a little more. I just felt like it needed to be a story based in realism for it to really work. So that's kind of where I was going with that. And then I thought, well, let's have everything mean something. And in order to have everything mean something, these characters need to be associated with this house in some way. And so, I mean, even when she's working in the library, I tried to make that mean something by having Agatha appear as a library patron so that nothing's really thrown away and that their interactions in the library actually lead up to something momentous happening later in the book. So yeah, that was basically my thought process in crafting the story in the later stages was just making everything come together in a way where it made sense. And I wasn't really, even though I think the novel is kind of long, even though I wasn't really wasting words so much.
yeah, it all works out. Like I said, I mean, I said it earlier, but yeah, I like the way you did everything inside and outside of the house. I was just wondering if there was any other thought about that. So we talked plenty about the book and the supernatural experiences that uh, are in it and the inspirations for it. But I'm also curious, have you had any supernatural experiences of your own in real life?
I don't know, to be perfectly honest with you. I remember one incident that stuck out in my mind when I was young. I was like a teenager, and my sister had some friends over. And I remember I was laying on my bed, and I couldn't sleep, so I was like laying in a weird position, like crosswise, with my feet against the wall and my head like practically hanging off the edge. Just trying to fall asleep. And my sister had some friends over, and I remember I could hear them at the front of the house. And then suddenly I heard like this cloud of voices just like fly over my head.
Oh,
And I remember at the time questioning whether that was real or if I had imagined it. And so to this day, I still don't know that. I would say that's the closest thing that's ever occurred in like waking life to me.
hmm.
Um, Now, whether or not you think dreams hold any supernatural elements are another story. I have had a couple of interesting dreams, but those are debatable. Are they supernatural or are they just our brain's way of working through things?
I
So,
think it could be. Do you have one that you can think of that you could just share and we can
oh yeah,
talk through
I
that?
yeah, I was thinking about this yesterday. Because I have had I've had a couple of dreams that came true when I was a little kid, like little things. But then as an adult, I've had a few with deceased
Hmm.
people or beings. Um, so my last librarian position that I had, my former job, I worked part time for several years, I think 5 years before I became promoted to a librarian. So for the first 5 years, I was doing pretty much what Mark was doing, like working the circulation desk. And then I got my library science degree. And while I was trying to find a position out in the world, one of my coworkers died. And she'd had a pretty high position in the library, and she died happy. I mean, she literally died working. Like, she just didn't wake up one day. She was somebody who was very passionate about library work. She was sincere about it. She was super professional. She was also a fan of horror films. So I kind of felt like this connection with her anyway. And she was, yeah, she lived a long life. She was maybe 82. I don't know. But she's just somebody that, I would want to emulate. And she passed away. And they kind of restructured her position, and I applied for it, and I got it. And I cannot remember how long that I was in this position for, but I was super thrilled. I took my responsibilities to heart. I really loved what I was doing. I was passionate about it too. And I don't think I had been in the position very long, like maybe just a matter of months, when I had this dream that I was in the workroom and the back workroom where only staff can go. And I was standing next to these tables where we put the courier bags, which is, where we sort items that are going to be shipped to different libraries. And I looked up and Pat was standing there dressed in one of her suits because she's always a super professionally dressed lady and like one of her brooches. And she was just smiling at me. Like she just had this big, bright smile and she was staring at me. And I was so startled that I just jolted out of sleep, like immediately. And it kind of scared me because I'm a big baby. Like I love reading horror and writing it, and I've been watching horror films since before I could read. And they don't scare me, but thinking I'm face to face with potentially a ghost does does scare me. So yeah, I jolted out of sleep and I wondered about that and it felt very real. Like I really had this face to face with her. And after I got over the kind of being scared bit, I did come to feel like maybe she like had blessed me. I mean, I loved
Mhm.
the job as much as she did. So that was one dream that I had where I wondered if there might be a little more to it than that. Another one I had was with a dog that I'd had. So
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. I really love talking about dreams and hearing other people's dreams. I've just always been fascinated about what like dreams could mean or this kind
Hmm.
of stuff. I mentioned earlier about how I had a same reoccurring dream about a haunted house or something, and that was just one of the coolest ones I've had. I've talked to a bunch of my friends now about other dreams, but yeah, that one about the haunted house is one that's always stuck with me, and I always got further into the house each time. Um, did you ever have a house through your childhood or anywhere you lived that was like the creepy house of the neighborhood or the one that seemed haunted?
No, because my parents have never moved.
Oh,
Um, my parents bought their first house a few years before I was born, and it was a brand new house. So I don't know. I mean, was it built on top of human remains? Who knows? I mean, Florida is old. Um, but and that was the house that I had the voices flying over my head incident in. And then my parents got divorced and my mom bought the house that she's in now and she's never moved out of that. So my entire childhood I lived in these two houses that are both fairly ordinary houses. So that in a sense that kind of influenced repetition as well. Like the house itself. I
uh,
mean, my parents' houses are one stories and the house I live in now is a one story. But I wanted the house to be ordinary because that's real life to me. And Florida is having ordinary houses, except that it's a two-story, which yeah, there are two-story houses here, but one floors are more common. So
yeah.
no real creepy houses. I
Huh.
mean, yeah, no, just my mom in Massachusetts when she was a kid.
That's fine. There was one house. Well, I guess technically two houses, but there was one house in the neighborhood when I was growing up. It was like, man, it was like tucked away behind a church. You went behind the church and then down a long driveway, and there's this one creepy house where apparently some woman died in, some old lady. I don't know how she died. I think she just old age or something. And it was creepy. It was nobody's lived in it for a while. There was literally a tumbleweed, and this was in Virginia, where I don't know why there would be a tumbleweed up in the mountains. Uh, and we never. got close to it, we would just ride past it, like ride down the driveway, look at it, and then go back. And this was middle school, I think. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I always had one regret that I never tried to go inside. And now as an adult, because I love creepy stuff, I love creepy houses, and it's probably a terrible thing to be like, oh, I wish I would have broke into this house, but I mean, that seems like the dumb kid experience is to sneak into the abandoned creepy house. I never did it. I don't know why. It's not like I was a good kid who never did anything wrong, but for some reason I never went in the house. Maybe being that young, I actually was creeped out enough to never do it. Maybe it's my brothers and our friends. Maybe they never want to do it, but for some reason we never did. I regret it. I did have one dream about that house though. The other dream with the other house is a completely random house. I have no idea where that come from, but I had one dream about this house, and it wasn't that special. I think we went in, the stairs collapsed, and I got trapped for a while. I think that was it. It wasn't a very entertaining one. The other creepy house is actually the house my family lives in now. Uh, I think I've told my brothers this story. I don't. I think it was just recently though. Apparently, when we first moved into the house, I was a sophomore in high school. I think. First night there, I walked into, we call it our sunroom. It's just a like one of the top floor rooms that faces out, and it's just completely windows. But I walked in there. There was a like a little chair and a table that got left in there, that wasn't ours. And then when I walk in, I just see like a dark shadow stand up, and it looked like a man to me, like a actual person, just stand up and walk out, walk out through one of the other doors. And that was the first night there, and it was creepy, and it was cool to me. And then I found out later that apparently the someone who lived there before us was just some guy that had some kind of issues. I don't know. There was something wrong with him mentally, and he would just wait in that room and watch over the neighborhood because it would just you could pretty much see the whole road. And whenever he would see people coming home, he would leave the house, rush to their house, and try to force his way in whenever they were going in. So yeah, and then nobody said if he died in the house or not, but he was there. Uh, but that's not the only other thing. The room I stayed in, which was our basement kind of bottom floor. Our house is weird. I'd say top story. It was one floor and then a basement, but then the basement got dug out so you can actually enter it like it was a different floor. Anyway, the room I was staying in was where an old woman would stay, and it was almost like she was locked in the room. She apparently died in the room, if the story I was told. But um, the inside was just a bunch of locks all down the road, the door frame, like she was trying to keep someone out. I took most of them off, so I only had two. There was maybe four or
You
five initially.
you
One
needed
night,
to.
one night while I was working on paper late because I was procrastinating for school, I had my door open. I had a window open, which it like closes down because it was a basement. So it was like just a little window like this big. And I just propped it open. One night, just randomly, both the door and the window slammed shut at the same time. And I was like, well, okay. And I was like, maybe it was just the wind. But then they locked. And I was like, maybe they were already accidentally locked. And when they shut, they were already, I don't know. I try to rationalize that. But then I was like, well, a woman did die in here. Maybe it was a ghost. Hopefully, I don't know. I think creepy stuff, so I'm kind of hoping it was creepy. But now my youngest brother also lives in the room. And once he moved in the room, I told him the story, and I don't think he cares or believes me. But yeah, those are my experiences, and I love stuff like that.
Yeah, I wonder if I'm just not sensitive. You know, like some people are say they're sensitive to things like energies and stuff. I just don't know because I do believe that there's more than what meets the eye.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I It might just be that I'm looking for them. Like I'm trying to make these stories seem real because I want them to be.
Hmm.
I mean, I like creepy stuff. I'm the kind of kid that goes and runs through graveyards in the middle of the night with my friends just to try to find the creepiest things we can. Or out in the middle of the woods at night, there was just a bunch of random stuff. I literally lived in the middle of the woods too as a kid. So I was always surrounded. In the middle of our woods, there was another little patch of these. It was a thicker patch of trees and weird looking trees that I don't know what kind of trees they are. I haven't seen them in years. And I never found out. But they were always bent out weird ways and it was darker in the area because it was so thick. And I thought that was a haunted part of the woods. But I think I'm just trying to make the stuff seem creepier to myself because that's the kind of stuff I like. But yeah, who knows?
Life is mysterious.
Yeah.
The shadow story is really cool, though.
It was my first time. And it might have been that somebody made it up because after I was told that story again, there was no other proof that guy even ever lived there. I was just told that story, and I was like, okay, this is true. This has to be true because I saw this shadow, and I was like, who knows? They could have just been lying to me because I told them the story first. But I don't know. It's cool, and I look for stuff like that. But yeah, the other thing, the house I'm living in now, whenever I was moving in with my friends, um, I was checking it out and by myself, and one of my friends, he was asking, he was having me ask if the place was haunted or had any history of being haunted because he actually is paranoid. I don't know, maybe that's a meaner way to say it. He doesn't like that kind of stuff and kind of believes it. So yeah,
Mm.
whenever I was checking out this house, I actually had to ask. We asked if there's any kind of history with it, and no, it's good. It's fine.
Oh, wow.
Besides all the stuff that fails, just because it is a kind of old house, nothing
Mhm.
else weird happens. Unfortunately, I would be fine with it. I was hoping so.
Yeah, yeah, Florida's just not, I mean, it's just not that exciting in terms of, well, at least where I should rephrase. The Tampa Bay area generally, it's just not that exciting in terms of old stuff because it's not that old.
Mm,
I think St. Pete, the St. Pete area was settled maybe, I would look at it somewhere like late 1800s or something
mm,
maybe. So we
okay.
don't have as much history in this part of the world.
Uh, well, it's fine. But yeah, no, I've rambled on a lot about my own experiences, but it's cool how you wrote this book. Regardless of, I guess, not having the most creepy life. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. It's cool to talk to horror authors and see where they come stuff because I love horror. And yeah, the way you did all these things is just really creepy. It really got me. I think I said in my video or something before. There was times while reading, I was hesitant to go to the next page because I was like, oh, this actually is pretty creepy. And I was like, it was suspenseful, and I didn't know what was going on. So I know it was great, great writing. I guess I should just thank you for writing and letting me read it.
Well, that's one of the greatest compliments I could ever receive. Thank you.
You're welcome. Um, do you write anything else, or do you have plans to write anything else?
Oh my gosh, yes, I am. I went through a dry spell recently because I think it was a combination of losing my eldest cat and then
Oh,
starting full time again. Because I was working as a freelancer and a part-time librarian for a while.
mm,
But just having those two things converge, it just killed my creativity. So I hadn't really written anything for maybe 5 or 6 weeks. I'm finally getting back into the groove again. But I have been writing short stories, like seriously writing short stories, probably since about 2002.
hmm,
And I've got a lot of them piled up, mostly because I would write a story and then instead of polishing it up, I would just start with another idea. So I've got a lot of stories that I could work on if I wanted to. Um, but I do write a lot of horror short stories.
cool.
I've branched out a little bit. So I wrote something that was actually published in June, I think. The Watchmaker Catches His Dragon.
Hmm.
which is, I think, would classify as like an urban fantasy short story. Very, very light romance because I'm just not good at romance. I'm better at gore. I can do gore, but I can't do romance. Um, and I've tried like literary, which I put in quotes, because it's just boring to me. I mean, I've tried it, but I think you have to really enjoy what you're writing in order for your stories to be good. And
Mhm.
just literary bores me. I'm sorry, I can read it, but writing it just isn't as fun.
Yeah.
And I also write poetry.
Oh.
So yeah, I wrote um a lot of words when I was a teenager that weren't any good, but I started writing seriously um, since about 2017 is when I started picking up poetry again. I also have a middle grade novel that's about 90% done that takes
Hmm.
place in Wonderland. So that one, after I finished repetition, when like I knew I was done with it, that book was so heavy that I felt like I needed something light. So
Oh.
I love Wonderland. Alice is an awesome character. This book does not feature Alice. It features somebody else with an A name. But I do have that, and then I've got another book that's kind of floating around in my mind that would be mystery horror, kind of like Repetition is. But it's actually the story that I started writing when I was 18 and gave up on.
Uh,
That the protagonist changed. She's now a guy instead of a girl, but the seed for the story is still there. So there's that too.
hmm. Cool. No, it sounds like you have a lot of cool stuff. I don't really write any poetry. I like haikus, but I feel like I'm too literal when I try to write, which I feel like isn't how poetry is always supposed to be. I write haikus because they're easy and quick. But yeah, I love short stories, especially horror short stories. They're so cool, and I like how they give you a way to experiment with writing. They're short enough, so it's like you're not writing a whole novel and questioning is this weird way or smearing through way of writing going to even be good. But short stories are just a great way to experiment, and I do that a lot when I write my short stories in weird ways, mainly for myself because I like doing that kind of stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I totally agree with you. That's when I decided to try the first person point of view was with a short story. That's when I discovered I liked it. So yeah, that is the time to experiment, definitely. And it's so funny that you said you like haikus because that's where I started with poetry back in
Mm,
2017, maybe 16. I started with haikus, so who knows? Maybe you'll go somewhere from there.
maybe. We'll see. I mean, I just always loved them ever since I loved about learn about them as a kid. Even in my senior year literature, it was supposed to be world literature class, but it was actually we pretty much only focused on British literature. But technically, it was a world literature class, so I did a whole presentation on haikus and tankas because I could. And I was pretty much the only person that left uh, Europe, and I was like, I'm doing something on Japanese literature or something like that. And yeah, I was an oddball in that, but nah, it was cool. And then now I'm looking forward to seeing what your other little novel's going to be. I mean, you said middle grade, but I read everything. I don't the yeah, I don't really care about age range for books. I mean, I was arguably manga and stuff is supposed to be for young people, but I love that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what else you do. It all sounds really cool. Before we go though, do you want to plug in your social?
Oh, well, I'm actually pretty easy to find. I try to keep it simple. So on Twitter and on Instagram, I'm at Sidell Wright. Facebook, it's the same. It's like facebook.com/Sidell Writes, whatever. And then my website is crystalsidell.wixsite.com/my site.
Yeah, and I'll put all those in the description for this so they'll be easy to find and so people can easily find you. I'll plug my own socials real quick just in case anybody wants to know and don't know mine yet. I am DAC Stories on my YouTube and then also on Twitter and Facebook, just DAC Stories. Uh, and then Instagram is different. It's the underscore AC. underscore stories. Yeah, thank you so much for being on this podcast with me. It's been a real joy to talk about your book and everything else creepy and horror esque.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored.
Well, and then thank you everyone else who has listened to this podcast. I hope you enjoy. And if you haven't uh, read Repetition yet, definitely check it out. I would highly recommend it. You can find that. I'll also provide a link for that. So check it out if you haven't. And if you have read it, I hope you enjoyed everything we talked about because I know I have. But thank you again. Thank you again, Crystal. And bye.